What the Crown is trying to show is that there's evidence that Ms. Leach was involved in some sort of plan to commit a crime. And what we're attempting to show in opposition to that is that at every turn, both publicly and privately, by text message, Facebook message, video message, press conference, and so on and so forth, the message from Ms. Leach is entirely consistent. And it's entirely about being peaceful, being lawful, about being unified, and anybody who's on the fringes and is doing things that are inappropriate, not wanting them to be a part of what she's doing, all of which is entirely inconsistent with this theory that she is somehow part of some plan to commit a crime here.
Robert Krajcik here reporting for Rebel News in Ottawa, Ontario on day 28 of the trial of Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. Both are being charged with crimes associated with their roles as organizers during the 2022 Freedom Convoy. For those of you that need a reminder, this was a large, peaceful demonstration here in downtown Ottawa against what I regularly refer to as the COVID-19 enterprise. Mandates, decrees, orders, lockdowns. You all remember those times. Now, the day's proceedings were primarily consumed with the defense anticipating this Carter application, which I'll explain in a moment, and beginning its arguments. The prosecution closed its arguments on the previous day, and now the defense will begin its own. I was fortunate enough to speak with Eric Granger, co-counsel for Tamara Lich, for a few moments, asked him a couple of questions. I also was fortunate enough to speak with Adam from the Democracy Fund, who explained this Carter application to us. The majority of the day's proceedings were dedicated to anticipation of a Carter application to be submitted from the Crown. Now, Eric Granger, who is co-counsel for Tamara Lich, laid out his sort of preemptive arguments against this application. Now, you're obviously wondering, what is a Carter application? I will explain it to you. It is a pursuit, an attempt, a move from the prosecution to allow for the attachment, the attribution of any incriminating evidence from one co-defendant to another. So in the context of this trial, any evidence that was presented by the Crown that's incriminating against one of the co-defendants can then be put onto the other. That could be in the form of statements from one of the defendants. It could be video evidence of one of the co-defendants. It could be testimony from some of the witnesses related to one of the defendants. Now, more specifically, why is this important? Because Tamara Lich, who is one of the co-defendants in this trial, has barely been mentioned at all across the 28 days now of proceedings, and I can testify to that myself, given that I've been in the courtroom every single day during this trial, and her name barely ever comes up, either from witnesses testifying, and by the way, none of the witnesses from the Crown had any direct communication with Tamara Lich whatsoever, or videos presented by the Crown from different avenues, whether it be body cam footage captured by police officers, or video of the actual on-the-ground events. Very rarely has Tamara Lich ever been presented, and it's very important for the Crown to successfully persuade the judge to accept this Carter application in order for them to capture Tamara Lich within what they perhaps believe is a strong case against Chris Barber. Like I said earlier, we were fortunate to speak with Adam, who's a lawyer with the Democracy Fund, who explained that in a little bit more detail. So I'm here with Adam from the Democracy Fund. Adam, you were in the courtroom all day today with me. So let's talk about this Carter application. The Carter application that will be coming from the Crown, what is its outcome if it is to be approved by a judge? What does it do broadly?
So the Crown is bringing a Carter application in order to have all of the statements by Chris Barber also be attributable to Tamara Lich. It's also referred to as a co-conspirators application. So basically what they're trying to do is show that Tamara and Chris engaged in this joint enterprise And what was interesting and what Granger pointed out is this joint enter. It can't just be sort of random statements about, hey, let's go here, let's do this. It has to. The one element it requires is that it has to be at its heart in reference to an unlawful activity. So all of the case law that surrounds Carter applications that Granger brought in is in reference to things like drug deals and murders, things that are unlawful in their substance. Just from an outset, it's inherently unlawful.
So a quick interruption. In a very general sense, let's even put this trial aside. A Carter application in the context of a criminal trial, if it's approved by a judge, you were telling me earlier that it allows for the attribution of any incriminating evidence against one co-defendant against the others. So in the context of this, you're talking about statements, but it could be other things too, like videos, testimony from witnesses that incriminates a particular co-defendant, correct?
Well, it's any of the actions or statements from one co-conspirator would become attributable to the other co-conspirator if the Crown is successful on the application.
Okay. Now, one last thing. As far as the requirements to have a successful application, what's the most important thing that needs to be proven or demonstrated by the Crown in order to get a judge to prove such a thing?
Right. So the first point, which we touched on briefly, is that there needs to be a conspiracy. And like I said, in order to have a conspiracy in this context, it has to be a conspiracy to commit a crime, a conspiracy for an unlawful act. So that's element number one, let's say. Element number two is it has to be in furtherance of that unlawful act. So that can't mean something that happened in the past. You can't just be giving a narrative of past events. It has to be something that will happen moving forward. Like, hey, let's go burn that house down. It has to be something looking forward, looking into the future.
The final hours of today's proceedings were consumed by Eric Granger, again, co-counsel for Tamara Lich, sharing a bunch of text messages that she had sent to Chris Barber, and also remarks and comments that she had made publicly, either on her social media platforms or in video that was captured during her public remarks at the Freedom Convoy. And all of these remarks from Tamara Lich shared by Eric Granger had the same theme. They were emphasizing the need for peaceful assembly, lawful demonstration in order to maintain the credibility of the demonstration. I got to speak with Eric Granger at the end of today's proceedings to ask him a couple of questions, including one regarding what he was seeking to accomplish with that series of remarks and comments from Tamara Lich that he had entered into evidence as part of his opening arguments. Okay, so I'm here with Eric Granger, co-counsel for Tamara Lich. And Eric, I wanted to ask you just about some of the questions you were asking towards the latter hours of proceedings. You're sharing a bunch of communications that Tamara Lich had sent via text message to Chris Barber and other sort of public pronouncements she had made, emphasizing the need for peaceful assembly and a sort of peaceful character of the Freedom Convoy. What was the purpose of that, or what is being demonstrated when you share that evidence with the court?
Well, the purpose behind that sort of evidence is what the Crown is trying to show is that there's evidence that Ms. Lich was involved in some sort of plan to commit a crime. And what we're attempting to show in opposition to that is that at every turn, both publicly and privately, by text message, Facebook message, video message, press conference, and so on and so forth, the message from Ms. Lich is entirely consistent, and it's entirely about being peaceful, being lawful, about being unified, and anybody who's on the fringes and is doing things that are inappropriate, not wanting them to be a part of what she's doing, all of which is entirely inconsistent with this theory that she is somehow part of some plan to commit a crime here.
Just a couple of semi-technical questions regarding this expected Carter application from the Crown. Is there a deadline upon which the Crown must submit such an application? Are they able to do that right to the last minute, or do they need to do that sometime soon, given that their arguments already came to an end?
Well, as far as the process goes, they've actually already brought the application. It's something that's the rules of court require it to be filed in writing, which it was in advance of things starting. So back at the beginning of September, we had at least some basic information about what it was they were trying to do here. So that's the application is in play. But what we're saying is they've taken their best shot at it, and there's simply no evidence before the court that there was a conspiracy here, and in particular, no evidence that there was a conspiracy that Tamara Lich was any part of.
Dear Rebel News audience, if you value and appreciate our in-the-field reporting, please remember we need your financial support to continue producing this. Please visit tamaratrial.com, help us out, and stay up to date with our ongoing reports.